The stars had never seemed closer to humanity than they did in the year 2157. After centuries of looking up at the night sky and wondering if they were alone, the people of Earth had their answer. They were not alone, and the universe was far more crowded than anyone had imagined. 20 years had passed since the Galactic Council made first contact with Earth. The massive ships had appeared in orbit without warning, but they came in peace. The Council represented 47 different species from across the galaxy, all united under one government that had maintained order for thousands of years. They offered humanity a choice: join them and take their place among the stars, or remain isolated on their single world forever. Earth's leaders had chosen to join, though not everyone had been happy about it. Some feared that humanity would lose its independence. Others worried that Earth would be conquered or enslaved. But those fears had proven unfounded. The Galactic Council operated on principles of mutual cooperation and respect. Each species contributed what they did best, and everyone benefited from the arrangement. For humanity, the transition had been smoother than anyone expected, and much of that success came down to one person: Secretary General Elena Vasquez. Elena stood on the observation deck of Nexus Prime, the massive space station that served as the Council's headquarters. The station orbited a neutron star in neutral space, equidistant from the major powers of the galaxy. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see dozens of ships coming and going, representing species from every corner of known space. She was a woman of average height with dark hair that was beginning to show streaks of gray. Her face carried the lines of someone who smiled often, but also carried heavy responsibilities. At 53 years old, she had spent the last 15 years as Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, and she had earned respect that few humans could claim. "The vote will be close today," said Ambassador Chen, standing beside her. He was a thin man with sharp eyes who served as her primary advisor. "The Dracs are pushing back hard against your mining proposal." Elena nodded slowly. The proposal in question would give Earth rights to mine asteroids in the Kepler Belt, a resource-rich region that had been sitting unused for centuries. The minerals there could power Earth's expansion for generations. But the Dracs' hegemony, one of the most powerful military forces in the Council, had been blocking the proposal for months. "Warlord Krath thinks we're getting too powerful too quickly," Elena said. "He sees us as a threat, are we?" Chen asked. Elena smiled. "We're barely 2 decades into space travel beyond our own system. The Dracs have conquered half a sector. If he sees us as a threat, it says more about his paranoia than our capabilities." The truth was more complicated, and Elena knew it. Humanity had surprised everyone with how quickly they adapted to galactic society. Human engineers had improved shield technology by 17% in just 5 years. Human doctors had discovered cures for diseases that had plagued alien species for centuries. Human artists, musicians, and philosophers had brought fresh perspectives that resonated across cultural boundaries. But it was humanity's diplomatic approach that truly set them apart. Where other species formed alliances based on mutual benefit or fear, humans built relationships based on genuine friendship and shared values. Elena had traveled to dozens of worlds, sitting down with leaders and ordinary citizens alike, learning their customs and understanding their needs. She had negotiated trade agreements with the Veln corporate clusters, massive businesses that controlled entire industries across the galaxy. She had established cultural exchanges with the Scythian Dominion, a reptilian species that valued honor above all else. She had even earned grudging respect from the Dracs, though Warlord Krath remained deeply suspicious. The council chamber was a marvel of engineering. The circular room could accommodate representatives from species of all sizes and environmental needs. Some delegates sat in water-filled chambers. Others breathed methane or required high-pressure suits. The council had spent thousands of years perfecting the technology that allowed such diverse beings to gather in one place. Elena took her seat at the human delegation's position. The Earth's flag hung behind her, a symbol of home that seemed so far away. Around the chamber, hundreds of other delegates prepared for the day's session. The noise was overwhelming. Dozens of languages being spoken simultaneously. Translation devices converting them into sounds each species could understand. The council speaker, a towering insectoid creature from the Hive Collective, called the session to order. The chamber fell silent. Today we vote on Proposal 3847, Humanity's Petition for Mining Rights in the Kepler Belt, the speaker announced. Secretary General Vasquez, you may present your final arguments. Elena stood and walked to the center of the chamber. This was the moment she had been preparing for. She knew every word of her speech by heart, but she also knew that words alone would not win this vote. She needed to reach the delegates on an emotional level, to make them see that humanity deserved this opportunity. Honored delegates, she began. 20 years ago, humanity was alone. We looked at the stars and wondered if anyone would ever answer our questions. Then you arrived, and you offered us something we could never repay, a place among you. You gave us knowledge, technology, and friendship. You showed us that the universe was not a cold, empty place, but a community of diverse peoples working together. She paused, letting her words sink in. Around the chamber, delegates leaned forward, paying attention. Today, we ask for the opportunity to contribute more to this community. The Kepler Belt contains resources that humanity needs to grow. But more than that, we want to prove that we can be trusted with such responsibilities. We are young compared to most species here. We make mistakes, but we learn quickly, and we are willing to work hard to earn your trust. Warlord Krath rose from his seat. He was massive, easily 3 meters tall, with gray armored skin and eyes that glowed like hot coals. His species, the Drax, had built an empire through military might and ruthless efficiency. They valued strength above all else, and they had little patience for what they saw as weakness. The human speaks of trust, Krath rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. But trust must be earned over generations, not decades. The Kepler Belt lies close to strategic shipping lanes. Giving humans control of those resources could shift the balance of power in this sector. The Drax hegemony cannot support this proposal. Other delegates murmured in agreement. The Veln corporate clusters objected on economic grounds. The Sethian Dominion questioned whether humanity had the technical capability to manage such an operation safely. Elena had expected these objections. She had prepared responses for each one. For the next 3 hours, the debate raged back and forth. She answered every question with calm precision. She provided data to back up her claims. She made concessions where necessary and held firm where principles were at stake. Finally, the vote was called. The chamber fell silent as each delegate registered their decision through their personal console. The results appeared on the massive holographic display that floated above the center of the room. The proposal passed by a margin of 3 votes. Elena allowed herself a small smile. It was not an overwhelming victory, but it was enough. Earth would have its mining rights. Humanity would continue to grow and prosper within the Galactic Council. As the session adjourned, several delegates approached Elena to offer congratulations. Even some who had voted against the proposal showed respect for how she had handled the debate. This was how diplomacy worked at its best. People could disagree without becoming enemies. But Warlord Krath did not approach. As Elena gathered her materials, she caught him watching her from across the chamber. His expression was unreadable, but his glowing eyes held something that looked like calculation. He was planning something, though she could not guess what. Ambassador Chen noticed her distraction. "Don't worry about Krath," he said quietly. "He's all bluster. The Drax know they can't challenge the Council's decision without facing severe consequences." Elena was not so sure. In her years dealing with various species, she had learned that the most dangerous opponents were not the ones who threatened openly, but the ones who plotted in silence. That evening, Elena returned to her quarters on Nexus Prime. The space station maintained residential areas for permanent diplomatic staff, and she had called this place home for years. Her quarters were modest by Council standards: a bedroom, a small office, and a living area with that magnificent view of the stars. She poured herself a glass of wine, a luxury imported from Earth at considerable expense. The mining rights victory deserved celebration, even a small one. She thought about calling her daughter back on Earth, but the time difference meant it would be the middle of the night in New York. Instead, she sat by the window and watched the ships moving through space. Each one represented a story: cargo vessels hauling goods between worlds, passenger liners carrying tourists and business travelers, military ships on patrol to keep the peace. It was a dance of civilization that had been playing out for millennia, and humanity was finally part of it. Elena thought about the path that had brought her here. She had been a lawyer before the Galactic Council arrived, specializing in international law. When first contact happened, Her expertise had suddenly become invaluable. She had been part of the team that negotiated Earth's entry into the Council. Her skill at navigating complex legal frameworks and cultural differences had caught the attention of world leaders, and they had appointed her as Earth's first Secretary General for Galactic Affairs. It had been the opportunity of a lifetime, and she had tried to make the most of it. Every agreement she negotiated, every relationship she built, every small victory she achieved, they all added up to a better future for humanity. Earth was no longer isolated. Human children were growing up knowing they were part of something larger that was worth all the long hours and difficult compromises. A soft chime indicated someone at her door. Elena checked the security display and saw Ambassador Chen standing outside. "Come in," she said, opening the door remotely. Chen entered, looking troubled. "I just received some intelligence from our contacts in the Drax delegation. Krath held a private meeting after today's session. He's furious about the vote," Elena sighed. "He'll get over it. The Drax have lost votes before." "Maybe," Chen said. "But our sources say he was talking about teaching humanity a lesson. About showing the Council that humans can't be trusted with power." "What kind of lesson?" Elena asked, suddenly alert. "They don't know. The meeting was very private, very secure, but the tone worried our contact." Elena considered this information carefully. Warlord Krath was ambitious and proud, but he was not stupid. He would not risk his position by doing something that violated Council law. Still, the warning bothered her. "Increase security around our delegation," she said, "and have our intelligence team monitor Drax communications more closely. I don't want any surprises." Chen nodded and left to carry out her orders. Elena returned to her window, but the peaceful feeling from earlier was gone. She had learned to trust her instincts over the years, and right now they were telling her that something was wrong. The next morning, Elena woke early to prepare for another day of meetings. She had breakfast with the delegation from the Hive Collective, discussing possible collaboration on terraforming projects. Then she reviewed briefing documents for upcoming votes on trade regulations and environmental protections. It was routine work, the kind that made up 90% of diplomatic life. Not every day brought dramatic votes or tense confrontations. Most days were spent in careful preparation, building relationships one conversation at a time, laying groundwork for future agreements. Elena had just finished a working lunch with representatives from 3 minor species when Ambassador Chen contacted her again. "Secretary General, there's been a development. The Veln corporate clusters want to meet with you privately. They say it's urgent." That was unusual. The Veln typically conducted business through official channels. Private meetings suggested something sensitive. "Set it up for this evening," Elena said. "And Chen? Keep this quiet. I want to know what they want before word gets around." The meeting took place in a secure conference room, away from the main diplomatic areas. The Veln representative was a creature that looked like a floating jellyfish, pulsing with bioluminescent light. Its species communicated through patterns of color and light, translated by advanced computers into other languages. "Secretary General Vasquez," the Veln began, its colors shifting to indicate formal respect. "We come with a warning. The Veln clusters have learned of a conspiracy." Elena leaned forward. "What kind of conspiracy?" "We believe certain parties plan to undermine humanity's position in the Council. The method is unclear, but the goal is to discredit you personally and make other species question whether humans should have been granted full membership." "Which parties?" Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew. The Veln's colors flickered with uncertainty. "We cannot say for certain. Our information is incomplete, but we felt obligated to warn you. The Veln clusters value our relationship with humanity. We would not want to see it damaged by treachery." After the Veln representative left, Elena sat in the empty conference room thinking. 2 warnings in 2 days, both vague but concerning. Someone was planning something, and she was the likely target. She could increase her security further, but that would signal fear. She could go to the Council with her concerns, but without concrete evidence she would look paranoid. Or she could continue as normal and trust that the systems in place would protect her. Elena chose to continue as normal. She had not gotten this far by hiding from challenges. Besides, she was on Nexus Prime, one of the most secure locations in the galaxy. What could possibly go wrong here? 3 days later, Elena went to sleep in her quarters after another long day of meetings. The air recycling system hummed quietly in the background. The stars shone through her window. Everything seemed peaceful and safe. At EO347 station time, the life support system in Elena Vasquez's quarters suffered a catastrophic malfunction. Emergency alarms sounded, but by the time the response teams arrived, it was too late. Earth's greatest diplomat, the woman who had guided humanity into the galactic community, was dead. The news reached Earth 6 hours after Elena Vasquez died. The Galactic Council sent an official message expressing their deepest condolences and explaining that a terrible accident had claimed the life of humanity's beloved Secretary General. A malfunction in the life support system had flooded her quarters with toxic gas while she slept. Death had been instant and painless, they assured Earth's leaders. An investigation would be conducted to ensure such a tragedy never happened again. Admiral James Chen received the news while aboard the UHSS Defiance, humanity's flagship currently on patrol near Jupiter. He was not related to Ambassador Chen, though they shared a common ancestry and had worked together often. James was a career military officer who had spent 30 years in service, the last 10 commanding humanity's modest defense fleet in space. When the communication officer brought him the message, James read it 3 times before he allowed himself to believe it. Elena Vasquez dead, the woman who had done more for humanity's future than perhaps anyone else in history, killed by a faulty air system. Something felt wrong about it immediately. James had met Elena many times over the years. She had consulted with him on defense matters and security arrangements for diplomatic missions. He had found her to be careful and thoughtful, someone who considered all angles before making decisions. She had once told him that her greatest fear was not being attacked, but being caught unprepared. That was why she always had contingency plans and backup systems. The idea that she would die from a simple equipment malfunction did not fit what he knew about her. Within an hour, James had redirected the Defiance toward Nexus Prime at maximum speed. He sent messages to Earth's leadership informing them of his intentions and requesting permission to conduct an independent investigation. The approval came quickly. Earth's new acting leader, President General Marcus Webb, had been Elena's deputy and shared James's suspicions. Find out what really happened, Webb told James over the secured channel. And if someone killed her, find out who. The journey to Nexus Prime took 3 days, even at the Defiance's top speed. During that time, James assembled a team of specialists. He wanted engineers who understood life support systems, intelligence officers who could dig into secured networks, and forensic experts who could analyze physical evidence. He also wanted people he trusted completely, because if Elena had been murdered, the killer might still be close by. The Galactic Council seemed surprised when James arrived and requested permission to conduct his own investigation. The station's security chief, a crystalline being from the Prism Confederation, assured him that their investigation had been thorough. We examined every component of the life support system in Secretary General Vasquez's quarters, the security chief explained. The failure originated in a pressure regulator that had developed microscopic fractures. These fractures allowed toxic gas to leak into the ventilation system. It was a manufacturing defect, nothing more. I would like to see the evidence myself, James said quietly. The security chief's crystalline structure flickered with what might have been annoyance. Admiral, we appreciate your concern, but questioning our investigation suggests you doubt our competence. The Galactic Council has been conducting security operations for thousands of years. I am sure you are very competent, James replied. But Elena Vasquez was humanity's representative. Earth has the right to conduct its own investigation into her death. We are not questioning your findings. We simply want to verify them independently. The security chief consulted with higher authorities and eventually granted permission. James suspected they agreed because refusing would have looked suspicious. The council wanted this matter closed quickly and quietly. A human admiral poking around might be annoying, but it was better than having Earth make formal accusations without evidence. James and his team spent the first day examining Elena's quarters. The rooms had been sealed since her death, preserved as a potential crime scene. Everything was exactly as she had left it: her personal belongings, her work materials, the glass of wine she had been drinking before bed. The engineering team focused on the life support system. Chief Engineer Sarah Martinez was a specialist in environmental systems who had designed many of the upgrades on human ships. She took apart the pressure regulator that had allegedly failed and examined it under high-powered scanners. "Admiral, you need to see this," Sarah said after several hours of analysis. James joined her in the makeshift lab they had set up. Sarah displayed a holographic image of the regulator's internal structure, magnified thousands of times. The council investigation said the fractures were caused by a manufacturing defect, Sarah explained. But look at the pattern of the damage. These fractures are too uniform, too precisely placed. Manufacturing defects are random. This looks deliberate. James studied the image carefully. He was not an engineer, but he had learned to trust his specialists. "You were saying someone sabotaged it?" "I am saying this damage was caused intentionally to look like a manufacturing defect. Whoever did this knew exactly where to create the fractures to cause a catastrophic failure, while making it appear accidental. This required detailed knowledge of the system and access to specialized tools." James felt a cold anger settling in his chest. "What else do you need to prove it?" "I need to examine the other components in the system. If this was sabotage, there might be other signs, tools marks, chemical residues, anything the saboteur left behind." Over the next 2 days, Sarah and her team took apart every piece of the life support system in Elena's quarters. They found 3 more pieces of evidence: a microscopic scratch on a seal that matched a specific type of tool used in starship maintenance, a chemical residue that had no reason to be present in a standard life support system, and most damning of all, evidence that the system's diagnostic computers had been tampered with to hide warning signs of the impending failure. "Someone reprogrammed the safety protocols," Sarah explained. "The system should have detected the pressure loss and triggered alarms hours before the gas reached dangerous levels. But someone changed the code so the alarms would not activate until it was too late. This was not a malfunction, Admiral. This was murder." James compiled all the evidence into a detailed report. He included holographic scans, chemical analysis results, and Sarah's expert testimony. Then he requested an emergency meeting with the Galactic Council's leadership. The council convened in a private chamber, smaller than the main assembly hall. Only the senior members were present, representatives from the dozen most powerful species, including Warlord Krath of the Drax hegemony. James presented his findings methodically, displaying each piece of evidence and explaining what it meant. He watched the council members carefully, looking for any reaction that might reveal guilt or prior knowledge. Most seemed genuinely shocked. The speaker from the Hive Collective expressed horror that such a thing could happen on Nexus Prime. The representative from the Aquatic Union demanded to know who was responsible, but Warlord Krath showed no emotion at all. His glowing eyes remained fixed on James throughout the presentation, unblinking and cold. When James finished, the council members conferred among themselves in a rapid exchange of translated languages. Finally, the speaker addressed James. "Admiral Chen, we appreciate your thoroughness in this investigation. However, the evidence you present is concerning but not conclusive. The anomalies your team discovered could have other explanations. Without identifying a specific perpetrator, we cannot take action based on speculation." James had expected this response, but it still made his anger burn hotter. "With respect, Speaker, the evidence clearly shows this was deliberate sabotage. Someone murdered Secretary General Vasquez. The Council has a responsibility to find out who. And we will continue investigating," the Speaker assured him. "But we must follow proper procedures. We cannot make accusations without proof. Doing so could create diplomatic incidents between member species based on nothing but suspicion." James looked around the chamber at the assembled leaders. Some looked uncomfortable. Others seemed eager to move past this awkward situation. And Warlord Krath continued to watch him with those burning eyes. "I understand," James said carefully. "Earth will expect regular updates on the Council's investigation, and we will be conducting our own inquiries to identify the responsible parties." "Of course," the speaker said. "That is your right as a member species." The meeting ended, and James left feeling like he had achieved nothing. The Council had acknowledged the evidence but refused to act on it. They wanted this problem to disappear quietly. James returned to the Defiance and sent an encrypted message to President General Webb on Earth. The message contained all the evidence his team had gathered and his assessment of the Council's response. Webb's reply came 12 hours later, after he had consulted with Earth's other leaders. "Come home, Admiral. We need to discuss our next steps in person." The journey back to Earth gave James time to think. He had spent most of his career believing in the Galactic Council and the order it represented. First contact had seemed like humanity's greatest moment, a chance to join a civilized community of species that had moved beyond war and conflict. But now he understood the truth. The Council was not a perfect institution. It was a political body where power mattered more than justice. The strong species like the Dracs could act with impunity because challenging them would disrupt the status quo. Elena had been murdered, and the Council would do nothing about it because investigating seriously might reveal uncomfortable truths about who was responsible. Earth would have to take matters into its own hands. When James arrived at Earth's orbital command station, he found President General Marcus Webb waiting for him with the entire Security Council. Webb was a former military commander himself, a man in his 60s with iron-gray hair and a reputation for strategic thinking. He had worked closely with Elena for years and had admired her deeply. "Your investigation confirms what we suspected," Webb said after reviewing all the evidence. "Elena was murdered. The question now is what we do about it." The room fell silent. Everyone present understood the implications. If Earth pushed this issue too hard, it could lead to conflict with whichever species was responsible. But if they let it go, they would be admitting that human lives did not matter, that stronger species could kill their leaders without consequences. "We have been conducting our own intelligence gathering," said Director Sarah Kim, head of Earth's intelligence service. "We have sources throughout the Council who owe us favors. They have been asking questions carefully, trying to identify who might have wanted Elena dead." "What have you learned?" James asked. 3 species had the most to lose from Elena's continued success, Kim explained. The Drax hegemony feared that humanity was gaining too much influence. Warlord Krath specifically has been vocal about seeing us as a threat. The Veln corporate clusters worried that human economic innovations would disrupt their business interests. And the Sethian Dominion has been concerned about our cultural influence spreading to their younger generation. "Any evidence linking them to the murder?" Webb asked. "Nothing concrete. But our sources report that representatives from all 3 species held private meetings in the days before Elena's death, meetings that were not logged in official records." James leaned forward. "They conspired together?" "It appears so. Each species had reasons to want Elena removed, but none wanted to act alone. Together they could share the risk and ensure the Council would not investigate too seriously." Webb stood and walked to the window overlooking Earth. From this height, the planet looked peaceful and beautiful, a blue jewel hanging in space. Humanity had fought so hard to protect this world and ensure its people had a future among the stars. "We need to send a message," Webb said quietly. "Not just to the conspirators, but to every species in the Galactic Council. We need to make it clear that you cannot murder human leaders and expect no consequences." "What kind of message?" James asked, though he suspected he already knew. Webb turned to face the room. His expression was hard, showing no mercy or doubt. "We give them one chance to deliver the individuals responsible for Elena's death. If they refuse, we take them by force." Several council members shifted uncomfortably. "That would be an act of war," one said. "No," Webb corrected. "It would be an act of justice. The Council claims to operate on principles of law and order. They have failed to provide either. If they will not enforce their own laws, then we will do it for them." Director Kim spoke up. "You are talking about sending military forces into the territory of 3 powerful species. Even if we could win such a conflict, it would make enemies of half the galaxy." "Maybe," Webb acknowledged. "Or maybe it will earn us respect. Right now, the galaxy sees humanity as weak. We smile and compromise and try to make everyone happy. Elena was brilliant at that approach, and it served us well. But now she is dead because someone thought we would accept her murder without fighting back." James understood what Webb was really saying. Elena had built bridges through diplomacy and kindness, but those bridges had been burned when she was killed. Now Earth needed to show a different side of humanity, the side that did not forgive the murder of its people. "What do you need from me?" James asked. "Prepare the fleet for combat operations," Webb said. "I am going to make one final attempt at justice through official channels. I will give the Council 48 hours to deliver the conspirators. If they refuse, you will go and get them yourself." James saluted. "Understood, sir." The next day, President General Marcus Webb appeared on every communication channel in the Galactic Council. His message was broadcast to Nexus Prime, to the homeworlds of all member species, to every ship and station across civilized space. Billions of beings heard his words. translated into thousands of languages. Webb spoke calmly but with absolute authority. He presented the evidence of Elena Vasquez's murder. He named the three species, the Drax hegemony, the Veln corporate clusters, and the Sethian dominion, that Earth believed were responsible. And then he delivered his ultimatum. You have 48 hours to deliver those responsible for this crime. Every individual who planned, authorized, or carried out the assassination of Secretary General Vasquez must be surrendered to Earth for trial. If you comply, we will handle this matter through proper legal channels and seek no further retaliation. If you refuse, Webb paused, letting the silence stretch. Across the galaxy, people waited to hear what threat this young species would make. If you refuse, Webb continued, we will come for them ourselves, and we will not stop until justice is served. You have been warned, the message ended. The galaxy reacted with shock and disbelief. Some species praised Earth's courage in standing up for justice. Others condemned the ultimatum as warmongering. But everyone understood that humanity had drawn a line. The question was whether Earth actually had the capability to back up its threats, or if this was just an emotional outburst from a grieving species. Within hours, the Galactic Council issued a response. They denied Earth's accusations, called the evidence insufficient, and urged humanity to pursue justice through proper diplomatic channels. They offered to form a special committee to investigate further, a process that would take months or years and likely produce nothing. The message was clear. The Council would not deliver anyone. They expected Earth to back down. President General Webb read the Council's response and nodded slowly. He had expected this outcome. The Council had made their choice. Now Earth would make theirs. Webb sent one more message to Admiral James Chen. Proceed with Operation Righteous Fury. Show them what happens when they underestimate humanity. Admiral Chen received the order and smiled grimly. For 2 decades, humanity had been the galaxy's friendly newcomers, eager to learn and cooperate. That era had just ended. Now the galaxy would learn what humans were really capable of when someone they loved was taken from them. The 48-hour deadline passed in silence. Earth made no further statements. The human defense fleet remained in position around their homeworld, giving no indication of their intentions. To the rest of the galaxy, it seemed that humanity's ultimatum had been nothing but empty words. On Nexus Prime, Warlord Krath held court with representatives from the Drax hegemony's military leadership. They gathered in a secure chamber, discussing the situation with Earth. The humans made threats they cannot possibly fulfill, one of Krath's generals said. They have perhaps 200 warships. We have 5,000 in the enforcement fleet alone. What can they possibly do to us? Krath nodded slowly, his glowing eyes fixed on a holographic display of Earth's solar system. Still, we should not underestimate them. The humans have shown innovation in several areas. Their technology improves rapidly. Technology means nothing without the strength to use it, another general scoffed. The Drax have conquered entire sectors through military might. These primates have been in space for barely 2 decades. Let them beat their chests and make their threats. When they realize they cannot back up their words, they will crawl back to the Council and beg for mercy. Krath considered this assessment. Everything logical said the humans were no threat. Their fleet was small. Their military experience was limited. They had no history of warfare in space. The Drax had been fighting battles among the stars for thousands of years, and yet something about the situation bothered him. The human President General Webb had not seemed like someone making empty threats. His message had carried the weight of absolute conviction. Either he was an excellent liar, or he genuinely believed Earth could enforce its ultimatum. Increase patrols around our borders, Krath ordered, and move the enforcement fleet into position around the human solar system. If they attempt anything foolish, we will crush them quickly and demonstrate what happens when a minor species challenges the Drax. Similar conversations were taking place among the Veln corporate clusters and the Sethian dominion. Both species dismissed Earth's threats as the tantrum of a grieving civilization that did not understand how power worked in the galaxy. The Veln calculated the economic costs of a conflict with humanity and determined they were minimal. Human trade was valuable but not essential. If Earth wanted to damage themselves by becoming isolated from galactic commerce, that was their choice. The Sethian viewed the situation through their lens of honor and martial tradition. They respected Earth's willingness to fight for their fallen leader. But respect did not mean fear. The Sethian had faced countless enemies over their long history. They had always emerged victorious. All three conspirator species reached the same conclusion. Humanity needed to be taught a lesson. They needed to learn that making threats against established powers would result in severe consequences. And so the Drax enforcement fleet began moving toward Earth's solar system. 5,000 warships, each one larger and more heavily armed than anything humanity possessed. It was meant to be a show of overwhelming force. A demonstration that would make Earth surrender without a fight. Warlord Krath himself took command of the fleet from his flagship, the Dominion's Fist. It was a massive vessel 5 kilometers long, bristling with weapons and protected by shields that could withstand planetary bombardments. As the fleet approached human territory, Krath opened a communication channel to Earth's leadership. "This is Warlord Krath of the Drax Hegemony, speaking to the government of Earth. You have made accusations and threats that cannot be tolerated. We come now to accept your surrender. Power down your weapons, stand down your fleet, and deliver your military leadership for trial. Do this and your world will be spared. Refuse, and we will show you why the Drax Hegemony is feared across the galaxy." The response from Earth came not from President General Webb, but from Admiral James Chen. His face appeared on the communication screen, and Krath was struck by the coldness in the human's eyes. "Warlord Krath, you were warned. You chose to ignore that warning. Now you will learn what humanity does to those who murder our people." The transmission ended. Krath felt a moment of genuine surprise. The human admiral had not even attempted to negotiate or beg for mercy. It was as if he believed he actually held the stronger position. "Prepare for battle," Krath ordered his fleet. "We will make an example of Earth's defiance." The Drax fleet entered Earth's solar system at the edge of the Kuiper Belt, far beyond the orbit of Pluto. They expected to find humanity's defense fleet positioned around Earth, ready for a hopeless last stand. Instead, they found nothing. Sensors show no human ships in the vicinity, the Dominion's Fist's tactical officer reported. "Their fleet appears to be absent," Krath frowned. "Expand the scan. They must be here somewhere." The fleet's advanced sensors swept through the solar system, looking for any sign of human military presence. They found only civilian traffic, cargo ships, passenger vessels, and stations going about their normal business as if nothing was wrong. "Perhaps they fled," one general suggested. "Perhaps they realized they could not win and evacuated their fleet to somewhere safer." But Krath did not believe that. Something felt wrong about this situation. Where were the humans? The Drax fleet advanced deeper into the solar system, moving past Neptune and Uranus. Still no sign of opposition. No defensive positions, no mines, no warning shots. Just empty space and the distant sun growing slowly brighter ahead. "Sir, we are detecting something," the tactical officer said suddenly. "Multiple objects in orbit around Jupiter. They appear to be satellites or stations." "How many?" Krath asked. "Over 2,000, sir. They are spread throughout Jupiter's orbital space." Krath studied the sensor data. 2,000 satellites seemed excessive, even for a major world like Jupiter, and something about their configuration bothered him. "Focus sensors on one of those satellites," he ordered. "Get detailed scans." The results came back a moment later, and Krath felt his first real sense of alarm. "Sir, those are not satellites," the tactical officer said, his voice tight with tension. "They are weapons platforms. Each one is armed with what appears to be a railgun system." "Railguns?" one general scoffed. "Those are primitive kinetic weapons. Our shields can handle anything they throw at us." But Krath was already thinking ahead. 2,000 weapons platforms, all positioned in a defensive grid around Jupiter. That suggested planning and preparation on a scale far beyond what Earth should have been capable of. How long would it take to construct 2,000 weapons platforms? He asked his staff. "Years, sir. At least 5 years, possibly 10, depending on available resources and manufacturing capability." 5 years. That meant humanity had been preparing for this possibility since shortly after joining the Galactic Council. While they had been smiling and negotiating and building friendships, they had also been building weapons. They had been preparing for the day when diplomacy failed. Warlord Krath felt a grudging respect for the deception. These humans were not as naive as everyone believed. "All ships, shields to maximum," he ordered. "Weapons ready. Advance through the defensive grid and continue toward Earth. Those platforms cannot possibly have enough firepower to threaten this fleet." The Drax fleet moved forward, and the weapons platforms opened fire. The railguns launched projectiles at incredible velocities, far faster than conventional kinetic weapons. The rounds were simple slugs of dense metal, but they traveled at a significant fraction of light speed. When they hit with devastating force. The first salvo struck the leading edge of the Drax fleet. Hundreds of projectiles slammed into energy shields that had been designed to stop plasma weapons and energy beams. Those shields had been perfected over thousands of years of warfare against enemies who all used similar technology. They were completely ineffective against solid metal. Traveling at relativistic speeds, ships began to die. The projectiles punched through shields as if they did not exist, tearing through armor plating and into the vital systems beneath. Explosions blossomed throughout the fleet as ships took catastrophic damage. Evasive maneuvers, Krath shouted. Return fire. But the weapons platforms were difficult targets. They were small, numerous, and spread across a huge volume of space. The Drax ships could destroy them, but not before taking heavy losses. And then the human fleet appeared. They came from behind the gas giant, where they had been hiding in the sensor shadow. Not 200 ships as intelligence had estimated, but 2,000. They were sleek and fast, smaller than Drax vessels but moving with incredible precision. Where did they get 2,000 ships? A general demanded. The answer was obvious to Krath now. The humans had been building in secret for years, using hidden shipyards in the outer solar system where council observers never visited. While everyone had been watching Earth itself, monitoring the construction of a few hundred defensive vessels, humanity had been creating a true military fleet in the darkness beyond Neptune. The human ships opened fire with the same railgun technology as the platforms. They coordinated their attacks with perfect precision, focusing fire on individual Drax vessels until they were destroyed, then moving to the next target. There was no confusion, no communication lag, no hesitation. How are they coordinating so effectively? Someone asked. The answer came from the tactical officer. Sir, we are detecting quantum entanglement signatures. They are using instantaneous communication between their ships. There is no speed of light delay in their commands. That technology was supposed to be theoretical. The Galactic Council had been researching quantum entanglement communication for decades without success. Somehow humanity had solved the problem and weaponized it. The battle became a slaughter. Drax ships died by the dozens, then by the hundreds. Their weapons were powerful but too slow to target the fast-moving human vessels. Their shields were formidable but useless against kinetic bombardment. Their numbers were impressive, but meant nothing when they could not effectively fight back. Krath watched in growing horror as his magnificent fleet was torn apart. These were some of the best warships in the galaxy, crewed by experienced warriors who had won countless battles, and they were being destroyed by humans who had supposedly been in space for barely 20 years. Retreat, Krath finally ordered. All ships fall back to the edge of the system. We need to regroup and reassess. But retreating from human weapons was not simple. The human ships pursued, firing constantly. More Drax vessels died as they tried to escape. By the time the survivors reached the edge of the solar system and jumped to faster-than-light travel, 3,000 of the 5,000 ships that had entered Earth's territory were destroyed or disabled. It was the worst military defeat the Drax hegemony had suffered in living memory. Warlord Krath stood on the bridge of the Dominion's fist, staring at the casualty reports. 60% losses, thousands of experienced crew members dead. The pride of the Drax military had been humiliated by a species that was not even supposed to be a military threat. Send word to the hegemony high command, he said quietly. Tell them we have engaged humanity and suffered heavy losses. And tell them that everything we thought we knew about human military capabilities was wrong. Back on Earth, Admiral James Chen watched the last Drax ships flee on his tactical display. The battle had lasted 4 hours from first shot to final retreat. Human losses were minimal. 3 ships destroyed, 17 damaged. The Drax had lost 60% of their fleet. Secure the system, Chen ordered. Begin recovery operations for our damaged vessels, and prepare the fleet for Phase 2. President General Webb appeared on the communication screen. Excellent work, Admiral. The galaxy is watching. What is Phase 2? Chen's expression was grim. The Drax came here expecting to teach us a lesson. We have taught them one instead. But the real conspirators, the ones who ordered Elena's assassination, are still free on their homeworlds. Phase 2 is simple. We go get them. You're talking about invading the territory of 3 major species. Webb said. Are you confident we can handle that? Sir, the galaxy has spent 2 decades underestimating humanity. They thought we were weak because we preferred diplomacy to war. They thought we were naive because we tried to make friends instead of enemies. They thought we would accept Elena's death because we would be too afraid to seek justice. Chen leaned forward, and Webb could see the cold determination in his eyes. They were wrong about all of it. We preferred diplomacy because it was the better path, not because we were incapable of warfare. We made friends because we valued peace, not because we feared conflict. And we will seek justice for Elena's murder because we believe in accountability, even if it means fighting half the galaxy to get it. Webb nodded slowly, then proceed with Phase 2. Show them what happens when they underestimate humanity. Within hours, the human fleet divided into 3 task forces. One headed toward Drax territory, one toward the Veln corporate clusters, one toward the Sethian Dominion. Earth was going to war, and the galaxy was about to learn a hard lesson about the species they had dismissed as harmless newcomers. Admiral Chen broadcast one final message before the fleets departed. It was addressed not to Earth's enemies but to the entire Galactic Council. You were warned. Secretary General Elena Vasquez was murdered by conspirators who believed they would face no consequences. They were wrong. Earth's fleets are now en route to deliver justice. To the 3 conspirator species, surrender the individuals responsible for the assassination, or your worlds will face the same fate as your fleets. To the rest of the Council, this is what happens when you refuse to enforce your own laws. If you will not provide justice, then we will take it ourselves. The message ended. Across the galaxy, billions watched and wondered if humanity had just signed their own death warrant, or if they had underestimated this young species far more than anyone realized. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council convened in emergency session. The mood was tense and fearful. No one had expected Earth to possess such military capability. No one had imagined they would actually attack 3 major species simultaneously. They cannot win, someone insisted. Even with their technological advantages, they are still 1 species against 3. The numbers favor us. But others were not so sure. The humans had just destroyed 60% of the Drax enforcement fleet with minimal casualties. If they could do that once, they could do it again. And somewhere deep in their cores, many species felt a twinge of fear, because humanity had just demonstrated something terrifying. They were willing to fight and die for principles, not just for territory or resources. They would go to war over the murder of a single person, because they believed it was right. That kind of conviction was more dangerous than any weapon. The 3 human task forces moved through space with purpose and precision. Each consisted of over 600 ships, accompanied by supply vessels and mobile repair platforms. They had been designed for exactly this mission, though their creators had hoped it would never be necessary. Admiral James Chen commanded the first task force personally, heading toward the Drax hegemony's core territories. His flagship was the UHSS Retribution, a vessel built in the secret shipyards beyond Neptune. It was smaller than the Drax Dominion's fist, but what it lacked in size it made up for in speed and firepower. The journey to Drax space would take 5 days at faster-than-light speeds. Chen used that time to review intelligence reports and refine his battle plans. He knew the Drax would be preparing defenses, gathering their scattered fleets to protect their homeworld. That was expected and even desirable. Chen wanted the Drax military concentrated in one location, where he could deal with them decisively. On the 2nd day of travel, Chen received a communication from one of the other task force commanders. Admiral Keiko Yamamoto was leading the fleet toward Veln territory. She was younger than Chen, barely 40, but she had proven herself a brilliant tactical thinker during war games and simulations. Admiral Chen, we have intercepted communications from the Veln corporate clusters, Yamamoto reported. They are attempting to hire mercenary forces to supplement their defenses. Several species have declined, citing their unwillingness to fight humanity after what happened to the Drax. Chen nodded. That was good news. The galaxy was starting to understand that Earth was not bluffing. What about the Sethian? Admiral Rodriguez reports that the Sethian Dominion is mobilizing their entire military. They view this as a matter of honor now. They will not surrender their conspirators without a fight. That is what I expected, Chen said. The Sethian value martial pride above practical considerations. Very well. Make sure Rodriguez knows he should expect a hard battle. The Sethian do not retreat easily. The communication ended and Chen returned to his preparations. He felt no joy in what was about to happen. War was never something to celebrate even when fighting for a just cause, but he felt no doubt either. Elena Vasquez had been murdered, and those responsible would face justice. On the third day, the Drax hegemony made one last attempt at diplomacy. Warlord Krath himself appeared on the communication channels broadcasting to Chen's flagship. Admiral Chen, this madness must end. The Drax hegemony is willing to discuss terms. We can negotiate compensation for Secretary General Vasquez's death. Credits, territory, trade agreements, anything reasonable. But you must turn back your fleet. If you attack our homeworld, there can be no peace between our species. Chen studied Krath's image on the screen. The warlord looked tired, his glowing eyes dimmer than before. The defeat at Earth had shaken him badly. You speak of negotiation now after you refused to negotiate when we asked peacefully, Chen replied. You speak of compensation, as if Elena Vasquez's life can be measured in credits or territory. You speak of peace, but you conspired to murder our leader. I admit to no such conspiracy, Krath said carefully. Of course not. You will maintain that denial until we drag you before a court and present the evidence. That is what we are coming to do, Warlord. We are coming to arrest you and every other Drax official who participated in the assassination. You can surrender them voluntarily, or we can take them by force. Those are your only options. Krath's eyes flared brighter with anger. You cannot invade Drax space. We have rebuilt our fleet. We have fortified our worlds. Your small force cannot possibly defeat us on our own territory. We will see, Chen said simply, and ended the transmission. 2 days later, the human task force arrived at the edge of Drax space. Chen's sensors immediately detected the defensive fleet that had been assembled. It was impressive. Nearly 4,000 ships drawn from various Drax military bases across their territory. They had positioned themselves in a defensive formation around their primary industrial world, a massive planet called Draxon Prime. They learned from their mistake at Earth, Chen's tactical officer observed. They are staying close together, using overlapping shields and coordinated fire patterns. They are not giving us easy targets, did we expect them to? Chen asked. The Drax are not stupid. They are experienced warriors who made one crucial error. They underestimated us because they thought our technology was inferior to theirs. Now they know better. Can we break through their formation, sir? Chen smiled grimly. We do not need to break through. We just need to demonstrate that staying in that formation will not save them. He opened a channel to his fleet. All ships implement pattern Delta 7. Focus fire on the command vessels. Ignore the smaller escorts unless they break formation to pursue. Remember your training, trust your crews, and show the Drax what human determination looks like. The human fleet split into smaller groups, each one moving with coordinated precision. They approached the Drax defensive formation from multiple angles simultaneously, forcing the defenders to split their attention. The Drax opened fire first, launching massive volleys of plasma weapons and energy beams. The human ships dodged with incredible agility, their AI-assisted navigation systems calculating optimal evasion patterns in microseconds. Some shots connected, but human shields had been specifically designed to handle energy weapons. They held firm against the barrage. Then the human ships returned fire. The railgun rounds crossed the distance in heartbeats, traveling so fast that even the Drax ship's advanced sensors barely detected them before impact. The projectiles slammed into Drax vessels with devastating force, punching through shields and armor like they were paper. But this battle was different from the one at Earth. The Drax had learned. They were using heavier armor on their ships now, and they had modified their shield frequencies to try to deflect kinetic weapons. It helped a little. Ships did not die from single hits anymore. It took multiple strikes to bring down a Drax warship. The battle turned into a brutal slugging match. The Drax had numbers and firepower. The humans had speed and precision. Ships on both sides began taking damage and casualties mounted. Chen watched the tactical display, analyzing the flow of combat. The Drax were fighting better than they had at Earth, but they were still making mistakes. They were too rigid in their formations, too predictable in their tactics. The Drax military had spent centuries fighting enemies who used similar technology and similar strategies. They had no experience dealing with an opponent who thought differently. Target their flagship, Chen ordered. Concentrate all fire from strike groups Alpha and Beta. I want that ship disabled. 40 human vessels focused their weapons on the massive Drax command ship at the center of the formation. Railgun rounds hammered its shields relentlessly. The shields flickered, failed, and the projectiles began tearing into the hull itself. The flagship tried to pull back, but human ships had already moved to block its retreat. More rounds struck home, systematically destroying weapons, engines, and communication arrays. Within minutes, the mighty warship was floating dead in space, its crew scrambling to evacuate. Broadcast a message to the Drax fleet, Chen said. Offer them one final chance to surrender. Tell them we have no desire to kill anyone who is not directly responsible for Elena's murder. Anyone who lays down their weapons will be treated fairly under the laws of war. To Chen's surprise, nearly a quarter of the Drax fleet accepted the offer. Ships powered down their weapons and withdrew from the battle. It seemed that many Drax military personnel had no desire to die protecting war criminals. Their honor as warriors did not extend to defending those who committed murder through sabotage rather than honest combat. The remaining Drax forces fought with desperate courage, but the outcome was inevitable. The human task force was simply better equipped and better trained for this kind of warfare. By the end of the 6th hour, the Drax defensive fleet had been effectively destroyed. Over 3,000 ships lay wrecked or disabled. Human losses were heavier than at Earth. 87 ships destroyed, over 200 damaged, but still far less than the defenders. Chen surveyed the battlefield, feeling no triumph. Thousands had died today on both sides. It was necessary, perhaps, but never something to celebrate. Send landing forces to Draxon Prime, he ordered. We are looking for specific individuals. Warlord Krath and his co-conspirators. Broadcast that anyone who interferes with our mission will be considered hostile. Anyone who cooperates will be left in peace. The Drax civilian government, watching the destruction of their vaunted military, made no attempt to resist. They provided the locations of Krath and the other officials involved in the conspiracy. Within hours, human Marines were kicking down doors and dragging Drax warlords from their fortified compounds. Warlord Krath himself was found in an underground bunker, surrounded by his personal guard. He fought when the humans came for him, killing 3 Marines before he was finally subdued with stun weapons. They dragged him out in chains, broadcasting footage of his capture across the galaxy. The mighty warlord who had mocked humanity's threats now knelt before human soldiers, bound and defeated. Meanwhile, Admiral Yamamoto was achieving similar success against the Veln corporate clusters. The Veln had relied heavily on mercenaries and automated defense systems. When the mercenaries saw what had happened to the Drax, most of them broke their contracts and fled. The automated systems were formidable but predictable. Human hackers, some of the best in the galaxy, infiltrated the Veln networks and turned the automated defenses against their creators. The Veln tried to negotiate, offering massive payments if Earth would just go away. Yamamoto refused. Money could not buy justice for murder. When human forces landed on Veln Prime, the corporate executives responsible for Elena's assassination were found hiding in a luxury space yacht, attempting to flee to neutral territory. Human fighters intercepted the yacht and forced it to land. The executives were arrested and added to the growing list of conspirators in custody. The hardest fight came in Sethian space, just as Chen had predicted. Admiral Maria Rodriguez faced the full might of the Sethian military, and they fought with the legendary ferocity their species was known for. The Sethian viewed war as a sacred duty and saw retreat as the ultimate dishonor. Every Sethian warrior preferred death to surrender. When human ships tried to disable Sethian vessels rather than destroy them, the Sethian crews often triggered self-destruct sequences rather than be captured. Rodriguez adjusted her tactics, focusing on overwhelming force rather than precision strikes. It was brutal and costly, but it worked. The Sethian fleet was ground down through sheer attrition. For every human ship destroyed, 3 Sethian vessels were eliminated. The breaking point came when Rodriguez did something unexpected. Instead of targeting military vessels, she broadcast a message directly to the Sethian population, bypassing their government's communication filters. Warriors of the Sethian Dominion, we respect your courage and your honor, but there is no honor in protecting those who use poison and sabotage instead of facing their enemies directly. The officials who ordered Elena Vasquez's assassination did not challenge her in honest combat. They sneaked into her quarters while she slept and murdered her with gas and malfunctioning equipment. Is that the Sethian way? Is that worthy of your sacrifice? The message hit the Sethian warrior culture like a bomb. Many had been told that humans were weak cowards attacking the Dominion without cause. Learning that their own leaders had committed such a dishonorable act shook their loyalty. A faction of the Sethian military mutinied, refusing to fight for leaders who had brought such shame upon their species. They seized the conspirators themselves and delivered them to Rodriguez's forces, along with formal apologies for the dishonor their leaders had caused. Rodriguez accepted the apology and the prisoners. She also accepted the mutineers' offer to join humanity's forces as allies, recognizing that many Sethian had no part in the conspiracy and still valued honor above political allegiance. 10 days after the human task forces had departed Earth, they returned home with their prizes. The conspirators from all three species were in custody, transported in secure cells aboard human ships. The galaxy had watched in shock as humanity systematically invaded three major powers and extracted the individuals they wanted with surgical precision. Many species expected Earth to execute the prisoners immediately in revenge. Instead, President General Webb announced that there would be a trial, a proper legal proceeding, with evidence presented and defendants given the right to speak in their own defense. It would be conducted under human law, since the Galactic Council had refused to pursue justice under their own system. The trial was broadcast across the galaxy. Billions of beings watched as human lawyers meticulously presented evidence of the conspiracy. Communication logs showing coordination between the three species. Testimony from whistleblowers who had been involved in the planning. Technical analysis of the sabotaged life support system. Forensic evidence that matched specific tools and techniques to particular individuals. The defendants tried various defenses. Some claimed they were following orders. Others insisted they had acted in their species' best interests. Warlord Krath maintained his dignity throughout, admitting to nothing but also refusing to show remorse. The evidence was overwhelming. The human judges, a panel of 3 respected legal experts, found all the defendants guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and crimes against sentient beings. The sentence was life imprisonment without possibility of parole. The conspirators would spend the rest of their lives in a maximum security facility on Earth's moon, visible from the planet's surface as a constant reminder of the consequences of murdering human leaders. The galaxy reacted with a mixture of relief and fear. Relief that Earth had not simply executed the prisoners in revenge. Fear because humanity had demonstrated they had both the capability and the will to strike anywhere in the galaxy when their people were threatened. The Galactic Council convened once more, this time to discuss humanity's new position in galactic politics. The humans had violated numerous council laws by invading member species' territory without authorization. Under normal circumstances, such actions would result in severe sanctions or even expulsion from the council. But these were not normal circumstances. Earth had acted only after the council refused to provide justice for the murder of their leader. They had used overwhelming force but had avoided civilian casualties. They had captured their targets rather than simply destroying their enemies' worlds. And they had conducted a fair trial rather than summary execution. More importantly, half the galaxy's smaller species were now looking to Earth for protection. If humanity could hold even the powerful Drax accountable for their crimes, then perhaps they could protect others from being bullied or exploited by larger powers. The Council's vote was surprisingly one-sided. Rather than sanction Earth, they officially recognized humanity's actions as a legitimate response to an unresolved crime. They also passed new legislation making the assassination of diplomatic officials a crime prosecutable by the victim's home species, giving legal backing to what Earth had done. It was a revolution in galactic politics, and humanity stood at the center of it. Admiral James Chen stood in the observation deck of the Retribution, looking out at Earth hanging in space below. The fleet had returned home victorious, but he felt no sense of triumph. They had done what was necessary, but thousands had died in the process. Both human and alien lives had been lost because the Galactic Council had failed to enforce its own principles. President General Webb joined him at the window. "You did well, Admiral." Elena would have been proud. Chen shook his head slowly. Elena would have found a way to resolve this without war. She was better at this than any of us. Perhaps, Webb acknowledged. But she is gone, and we had to handle the situation with the tools we had. We showed the galaxy that humanity will not tolerate the murder of our people. That was necessary. And now? Now we make sure this never happens again. We establish the protocols that will protect other species from similar attacks. We become the guardians Elena always dreamed we could be. But we do it with the strength to back up our principles. Chen thought about that. Elena had built bridges with words and friendship. Those bridges had been burned by her murderers. Now Earth would build new bridges. But these would be reinforced with the knowledge that humanity could and would defend itself and its allies. It was not the galaxy Elena had hoped to create, but perhaps it was the one that would actually work. What about the prisoners? Chen asked. They will spend the rest of their lives watching Earth from their prison on the moon, thinking about what they did. And every species in the galaxy will look at them and remember what happens when you underestimate humanity. On the lunar prison, Warlord Krath stood at the window of his cell, looking down at the blue jewel of Earth. He had been one of the most powerful military leaders in the galaxy. Now he was a prisoner of the species he had dismissed as harmless primates. The irony was not lost on him. The humans had defeated him not through savage violence or overwhelming numbers, but through careful planning and technological innovation. They had been preparing for betrayal since joining the Council, building their strength in secret while maintaining a friendly facade. It had been a masterful deception, and Krath had to admit a grudging respect for it. The humans were not as naive as everyone believed. They were patient, clever, and absolutely ruthless when their principles were threatened. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. Humanity's preference for peace did not mean they were incapable of war. It just meant that when they did fight, they fought for reasons that mattered, with a determination that could not be broken. Warlord Krath would spend the rest of his life remembering that lesson, and through the broadcasts of this trial and imprisonment, the rest of the galaxy would learn it too. The weeks following the trial brought profound changes to galactic politics. The Galactic Council, which had maintained relative stability for thousands of years through careful balance of power between major species, found itself facing a new reality. Humanity, the species that everyone had dismissed as newcomers barely worth noticing, had become the most influential force in the galaxy almost overnight. The change was not welcomed by everyone. The older established species viewed Earth's rise with suspicion and resentment. They had spent centuries building their positions of power through careful diplomacy and strategic alliances. Humanity had achieved comparable influence in a matter of weeks through sheer military force and moral conviction. But the smaller species, the ones who had spent generations being pushed around by larger powers, saw humanity's actions differently. They saw hope. If Earth could hold even the mighty Drax hegemony accountable for murder, then perhaps the age of bullying and exploitation was finally ending. President General Marcus Webb understood that the galaxy stood at a crossroads. Earth could use its newfound power to dominate others, becoming another Drax hegemony. Or they could use their strength to protect the principles that Elena Vasquez had dedicated her life to promoting: justice, cooperation, and respect for all sentient beings. Webb chose to honor Elena's memory by choosing the harder path. 3 months after the trial concluded, Webb called for an emergency session of the Galactic Council. Representatives from all member species gathered at Nexus Prime, the same station where Elena had died. There was tension in the air. Many delegates feared that Earth was about to make demands or impose conditions on the Council. Instead, Webb stood before the Assembly and presented something unexpected: a proposal called the Vasquez Protocols. Honored delegates, Webb began, the events of recent months have exposed a fundamental weakness in the Galactic Council's system of justice. When powerful species commit crimes against weaker ones, there is often no effective mechanism for accountability. The Council prefers to avoid conflict even when justice demands action. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. Webb was speaking truths that everyone knew but rarely acknowledged openly. My predecessor, Secretary General Elena Vasquez, believed in this council. She believed that diverse species could work together for the common good. She dedicated her life to proving that cooperation was stronger than conflict. Her murder was an attack not just on humanity, but on everything she stood for. Webb paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives. Earth could respond to this attack by withdrawing from the Council and pursuing our own interests alone, Many on my world have urged exactly that, but I believe Elena would want us to make the Council stronger, not abandon it. Therefore, I propose the following protocols. A holographic display appeared, showing the details of Webb's proposal. The chamber fell silent as delegates read through the terms. The Vasquez protocols contained three main provisions. First, the assassination of any diplomatic official would be treated as a crime against the entire Council, prosecutable by any member species. This gave legal justification to actions like Earth's recent military operations. Second, any species could petition the Council for protection if they believed they were being threatened or coerced by a more powerful member. A special tribunal would investigate such claims and, if found valid, authorize collective action to defend the threatened species. Third, and most controversially, Earth would maintain a permanent peacekeeping fleet authorized to respond to violations of Council law anywhere in the galaxy. This fleet would be subject to oversight by the Council, but would not require advance authorization for defensive operations. The reactions were immediate and predictable. Smaller species voiced enthusiastic support. The protocols would finally give them protection from exploitation, but larger species objected strongly. You are asking the Council to legitimize military intervention in our internal affairs, the Drax representative protested. He was not Warlord Krath, who sat in a prison cell on Earth's moon, but a new diplomat who spoke with considerably less arrogance than his predecessor. You are asking us to surrender our sovereignty to human judgment. Not human judgment, Webb corrected. Council law. Earth would only act in cases where clear violations had occurred, and any action we took would be subject to Council review afterwards. If we abuse this authority, we would face the same consequences as any other species who violated Council principles. You have just demonstrated that you can defeat any species in this Council. Militarily, the Sethian representative said. She was a warrior herself, and her species had learned painful lessons about challenging Earth. What stops you from simply doing whatever you want, regardless of Council approval? It was a fair question, and Webb answered it honestly. Our principles stop us. Humanity values justice and cooperation. We do not seek to dominate the galaxy. We seek to make it safer and more fair for everyone. But we will not stand by and watch powerful species commit crimes without consequences. If the Council will not enforce its own laws, then we will do it ourselves. The debate raged for hours. Some delegates supported the protocols enthusiastically. Others opposed them vehemently. Many remained undecided, weighing the benefits against the risks. In the end, the Vasquez protocols passed by a narrow margin. It was a victory, but Webb knew it was also a burden. Earth had just committed itself to being the galaxy's guardian, whether the galaxy wanted one or not. Admiral James Chen received the news while inspecting the new ships being constructed at the expanded shipyards beyond Neptune. The secret facilities that had built Earth's hidden fleet were now operating openly, producing vessels at an impressive rate. Other species were watching carefully, noting every ship that joined the human defense fleet. The protocols passed, Chen said to his officers, which means we have a new mission. We are no longer just defending Earth. We are defending the principles of the Galactic Council. One of his commanders spoke up. Admiral, many in the fleet are uncomfortable with this role. We signed up to protect humanity, not police the galaxy. Chen nodded. He understood the concern. I will not order anyone to serve who does not believe in this mission. Anyone who wants to transfer to purely defensive duties can do so without prejudice. But understand what we are really doing here. Elena Vasquez spent her life building relationships and promoting cooperation. She was murdered because some species saw her success as a threat. If we abandon her vision now, we are saying that murder works, that violence defeats idealism. He paused, looking at the faces of his officers. I am not willing to let that be the lesson the galaxy learns. Elena believed that diverse species could work together for the common good. I believe we can prove she was right, but only if we are willing to defend those principles when they are threatened. The officers considered his words. Slowly, one by one, they nodded in agreement. They would stay. They would serve. They would carry on Elena's work in the only way they knew how, by being strong enough to protect those who could not protect themselves. Over the following months, Earth's new role became reality. Human ships began patrolling trade routes that had been plagued by piracy. Human diplomats mediated disputes between species that had been on the verge of war. human peacekeepers deployed to border regions where larger species had been encroaching on their smaller neighbors' territory. Not every intervention was successful. Not every conflict could be resolved peacefully. But the message was clear. The age of unchecked aggression by powerful species was ending. There were consequences now for breaking council law, and those consequences came swiftly. The Drax hegemony struggled to rebuild after their devastating losses. Their military had been gutted, their leadership imprisoned or discredited. The new government that emerged was considerably more humble and willing to cooperate with council regulations. They had learned that military might alone was not enough when facing an opponent with superior technology and unshakable determination. The Velen corporate clusters adapted more quickly. They were pragmatists at heart, and they recognized opportunity when they saw it. If humanity was going to be the dominant military power, then the Velen would become Earth's preferred economic partners. They began investing heavily in human colonies and joint ventures, calculating that friendship with Earth was more profitable than opposition. The Sethian Dominion took a different path. The faction that had mutinied to deliver their corrupt leaders to justice became the foundation of a reformed government. They embraced a philosophy that combined their traditional warrior values with humanity's emphasis on justice and honor. Many young Sethian joined Earth's peacekeeping forces, serving alongside humans as allies rather than enemies. Not everyone was happy with the new order. Some species resented Earth's influence and worked quietly to undermine it. There were incidents, small conflicts, tests of humanity's resolve. Each time, Earth responded with measured force. Never more violence than necessary, but always enough to make the point clear. The galaxy was learning that humanity's strength was not just in their advanced weapons or their tactical brilliance. Their real strength lay in their willingness to suffer losses to defend their principles. Other species fought for territory or profit. Humans fought for ideals, and that made them nearly impossible to defeat because they would never surrender what they believed in. 6 months after the Vasquez protocols were implemented, Admiral Chen found himself back at Nexus Prime for a ceremony. The Galactic Council had decided to honor Elena Vasquez's memory with a permanent memorial on the station. It would stand in the main plaza where billions of beings from across the galaxy would pass by it. Every year Chen attended the dedication ceremony, along with President General Webb and dozens of other Earth representatives. Delegates from every council species attended, even the Drax and Velen who had conspired to kill her. It was a strange gathering, equal parts mourning and celebration. The memorial was a simple column of crystalline material that caught and reflected light in beautiful patterns. At its base was a plaque with Elena's name and a quote from one of her speeches. "Our differences make us stronger when we choose cooperation over conflict." Webb spoke at the ceremony, his voice carrying through the plaza and being broadcast across the galaxy. Elena Vasquez believed that the Galactic Council could be something greater than a simple alliance of convenience. She believed it could be a true community, where every species contributed their strengths and supported each other's weaknesses. She worked tirelessly to make that vision real, building friendships and understanding between peoples who had never trusted each other before. Webb paused, emotion showing on his face. Her murder could have destroyed everything she built. It could have driven humanity to isolation and revenge. But we chose a different path. We chose to make the Council live up to the ideals Elena fought for. We chose to prove that justice and cooperation are not weaknesses but strengths. He looked around at the assembled delegates. The Vasquez protocols are not about human dominance. They are about making sure that what happened to Elena never happens to anyone else's leader. They are about creating a galaxy where diplomats can do their work without fear of assassination, where weaker species can exist without being exploited by stronger ones, where the Council's laws actually mean something. Webb stepped back and Chen approached the memorial. He placed a bouquet of flowers from Earth at its base, a gesture that was becoming traditional for human mourning. Other delegates followed, each adding their own species' symbol of respect for the dead. As Chen stood looking at Elena's memorial, he thought about everything that had changed in such a short time. They had gone to war. They had killed thousands. They had terrified half the galaxy and inspired the other half. All because one woman had been murdered, and humanity had refused to let that crime go unpunished. Was it worth it? Chen honestly did not know. The costs had been high. The risks had been enormous. Earth could have lost everything if their gamble had failed, but they had not failed. They had won, not just a military victory but a moral one. They had proven that principles mattered more than power, that justice was worth fighting for, that a species could be both peaceful and strong. A young officer approached Chen. "Admiral, there is a situation developing near the Outer Rim. The Kravix warlords are threatening to invade the Peaceful Collective's territory. The Collective has petitioned the Council for protection under the Vasquez Protocols." Chen nodded. The Peaceful Collective was a group of small species who had banded together for mutual protection, but had no real military capability. The Kravix were raiders and bullies who had been preying on their neighbors for generations. It was exactly the kind of situation the protocols were designed to address. "Assemble Task Force 7 and prepare for deployment," Chen ordered. "Let the Kravix know that if they proceed with their invasion, they will be facing human warships, and let the Peaceful Collective know that they are under our protection." The officer saluted and departed. Chen allowed himself a small smile. This was what Elena would have wanted. Not the violence or the military power, but the idea that smaller species could call for help and actually receive it, that bullies could be stopped, that justice could prevail. He stood at the memorial a moment longer, then turned to leave. There was work to do. As Chen walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime, he passed representatives from dozens of species. Some nodded respectfully. Others watched him with fear or suspicion. A few even smiled, grateful for Earth's protection. The galaxy had changed and humanity had changed with it. They were no longer the naive newcomers who had joined the Council 2 decades ago. They were guardians now, protectors. The species that other civilizations looked to when they needed help. It was a heavy burden, but one that humanity accepted. Elena Vasquez had taught them that being part of a community meant having responsibilities as well as rights. She had shown them that diplomacy and friendship could build bridges between species. Now Earth was showing the galaxy that those bridges needed to be protected. That the principles Elena died for were worth defending with force when necessary. Back on Earth, in the capital city where the world government met, there was another memorial to Elena Vasquez. It was larger and more elaborate than the one on Nexus Prime, featuring a statue of her standing with her arms outstretched, welcoming all who approached. Children came to the memorial on school trips, learning about the woman who had guided humanity into the stars. Veterans of the recent conflicts came to remember what they had fought for. Diplomats from across the galaxy visited to pay their respects to someone who had truly understood what cooperation meant. And every evening at sunset, someone came to place fresh flowers at the base of the statue. Sometimes it was a government official. Sometimes it was a random citizen. Sometimes it was someone from another world entirely. An alien who had been inspired by Elena's vision. The flowers accumulated throughout the day, a rainbow of colors from dozens of worlds until the memorial was surrounded by beauty. Then, each night the flowers were collected and distributed to hospitals and care facilities across the city, spreading that beauty to those who needed it most. It was a small tradition, but it captured something essential about Elena Vasquez's legacy. She had brought different peoples together not through force or intimidation, but through kindness and understanding. She had planted seeds of friendship that continued to grow even after her death. President General Webb stood at his office window, looking out at the memorial in the distance. He had been Elena's deputy and friend for over a decade. Her death had left a hole in his heart that would never fully heal, but it had also given him purpose. Every decision he made, every policy he implemented, every deployment he authorized, all of it was guided by one question. What would Elena have wanted? She would have wanted justice, which they had achieved. She would have wanted the Council to be stronger and more fair, which they were working toward. And she would have wanted humanity to use its strength wisely, protecting rather than dominating. Webb was determined to honor that vision, no matter how difficult the path ahead might be. A communication alert interrupted his thoughts. It was Admiral Chen, reporting from Nexus Prime. "Sir, the Kravix have backed down. When they learned human forces were en route, they withdrew their invasion fleet and are now requesting mediation talks with the Peaceful Collective. Apparently they do not want to test whether our weapons are as effective as the rumors claim." Webb smiled. "Excellent. That is exactly the outcome we hoped for. Deploy observers to make sure the talks proceed fairly. But keep our main fleet on standby in case the Kraviks change their minds. Understood, sir. There is one more thing. The Peaceful Collective has asked if they can send a delegation to Earth. They want to visit Elena's memorial and thank humanity personally for protecting them. Tell them they are welcome, Webb said, and arrange for them to speak to our Diplomatic Academy students. Let our future diplomats hear firsthand from species who benefit from the principles Elena taught us. The transmission ended, and Webb returned to his contemplation of the memorial. The statue of Elena stood with the setting sun behind her, making her appear to glow with golden light. It was a beautiful illusion, a trick of timing and perspective, but in a way it was also truth. Elena Vasquez had brought light to the galaxy through her work. She had shown different species that they could trust each other, that cooperation produced better results than conflict. Her murder could have extinguished that light. Instead, it had made it burn brighter. Humanity had proven that they would defend the principles Elena stood for, that they would fight to protect a vision of the galaxy, where justice and cooperation prevailed over power and exploitation. The cost had been high. Thousands had died in the brief but intense conflicts. Earth had made enemies who would plot revenge for generations. The burden of being the galaxy's guardian would test humanity's resolve in ways they could not yet imagine. But it was worth it. Every species that now lived without fear of bullying, every diplomat who could do their work without worrying about assassination, every child who grew up believing that justice mattered, they were all part of Elena's legacy. Webb turned away from the window and returned to his desk. There were reports to read, decisions to make, crises to manage. The work of governing never ended. But he carried with him the knowledge that the work mattered, that human choices rippled across the galaxy, affecting billions of lives, that Elena Vasquez had not died in vain. On Earth's moon, in the maximum security prison that housed the conspirators who had murdered Elena, Warlord Krath sat in his cell and watched Earth rotate slowly below. He had time to think now, endless hours to contemplate his mistakes and their consequences. He had believed that killing Elena would weaken humanity, that removing their beloved diplomat would leave them confused and vulnerable. Instead, it had awakened something in them, a determination that proved far more dangerous than any weapon. Krath had spent his life studying warfare and strategy. He understood that battles were won through superior force, better tactics, and willingness to do what was necessary. He had built an entire career on those principles, but he had never understood what he was fighting against until it was too late. Humanity did not fight for territory or resources or glory. They fought for ideas, for principles, for the memory of a single person who had believed in something better. That kind of enemy could not be defeated through conventional means. You could destroy their ships, devastate their worlds, kill their soldiers, but you could not break their will as long as they believed in what they were fighting for. Krath would spend the rest of his life in this cell, a living reminder of what happened when you underestimated humanity's capacity for both forgiveness and vengeance. They had not executed him, which showed mercy, but they had imprisoned him where he would watch their world every day, which showed that they never forgot. It was, he had to admit, a perfectly chosen punishment. The humans had learned well how to make their point. The galaxy moved forward into an uncertain future. The Vasquez protocols created new structures and expectations, but implementing them would take years. There would be challenges, setbacks, conflicts that tested humanity's resolve and wisdom, but there would also be victories. Small species finding their voice, bullies being held accountable, justice being served even when it was difficult or costly, and through it all, Elena Vasquez's vision would endure. The idea that different species could work together, that cooperation was stronger than conflict, that every sentient being deserved respect and justice. Admiral Chen stood once more at Elena's memorial on Nexus Prime. He came here whenever he visited the station, taking a few moments to remember the woman who had started everything. "We are doing our best," he said quietly to the memorial, knowing Elena could not hear but needing to say the words anyway. "We are trying to build the galaxy you dreamed of. It is harder than you made it look. There is more violence, more conflict, more compromise than you would have accepted, but we are trying." He placed a hand on the crystalline column, feeling its smooth surface. "The galaxy knows now that humanity will not tolerate the murder of our people. They know we have the strength to enforce our principles, but I hope they also come to understand that we prefer peace, that we would rather build than destroy, cooperate than dominate." Chen stepped back and saluted the memorial, a final gesture of respect. Then he turned and walked away, returning to his duties as commander of humanity's peacekeeping fleet. Behind him, the memorial caught the light and cast rainbow patterns across the plaza, a reminder that even in the cold darkness of space, beauty and hope could endure. Elena Vasquez was gone, but her dream lived on, and humanity, the species that the galaxy had dismissed as naive newcomers, would spend generations proving that her dream was worth fighting for. The galaxy had killed Earth's leader. Mankind's wrath had crushed their armies, but in the end it was not rage that defined humanity's response, but determination. The determination to seek justice. The determination to protect the innocent. The determination to prove that principles mattered more than power. And that determination, more than any weapon or fleet, was what made humanity truly dangerous. Because species that fought for ideas could endure losses that would break others. They could persist through setbacks that would make others surrender. They could change the galaxy itself when they believed strongly enough in what they were fighting for. The memorial stood silent in the plaza, a monument to one woman and the ideals she had died for, but it was also a warning, visible to every being who passed through Nexus Prime. A warning that humanity remembered, a warning that humanity protected its own, a warning that the age of unchecked power and unpunished crimes was over, and most importantly, a promise that Elena Vasquez's dream of a better, fairer, more just galaxy would endure, protected by the species she had guided into the stars. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Now came the hard work of building something better in the wake of that education, and humanity, changed forever by loss and victory alike, would lead the way forward into an uncertain but hopeful future.